Well, good morning and welcome to the program. It is the dialogue. Every Saturday morning we sit down to look at issues that transpired through the week. We internalize them. We also put them into perspective, and we gather opinions. My name is Simapolo. Welcome once again. It's been quite an eventful week, and well, issues of security have now subsided. We don't hear anything much more about them, but then the good news is that we also received vaccines, and hopefully that gives us hope that schools or business and the economy will be opened soon. And again, in this week, we had the presidential address. President talked about issues to do with the COVID situation, and the good news again was that houses of worship were opened, though with strict guidelines. And again, maybe the issue is the reopening of schools that will continue to wait until probably the beginning of January. Some of those issues we will talk, we will discuss them in the program, and I'm happy that this morning we have Dr. Retired Colonel Besigye, the former president of the Forum for Democratic Change, FDC political party. He is with us. Good morning, Doctor, and welcome to the dialogue.
Thank you very much, and very good morning to all the Salt TV viewers and listeners wherever you are joining us from.
Welcome once again, Doctor. You were unequivocal on matters of continued closure of schools, and you came out to even demand that they should be immediately reopened. But from what we've heard now, after the presidential address, schools probably, if they are to open, it will be the beginning of January. And the president says it's all about protecting the vulnerable people, the vulnerable groups, especially the parents, the grandparents, saying that the children will now, if the schools are open, the children will infect their parents.
Well, thank you very much, and really this is one of the things that has caused me a lot of agony, and indeed the whole country should agonize, because let me tell you, Apollo, even before you talk about the pros and the cons of opening up education, it should be understood that education is the most important, the most consistent, the most structured way of building knowledge in a country. And it should also be understood that knowledge is critical for survival of any society. Society survives on the basis of knowledge, and development happens on the basis, most importantly, of knowledge, not of resources. You can have resources and you don't know what to do with them, which is the dilemma for Africa. Africa is the most endowed continent in the world, but where its people live in misery, in poverty, in humiliation because of lack of knowledge. You have a country like Japan, which are just a few islands with no resource at all, with a lot of challenges that are natural, earthquakes and things like that, which are permanently there. But it is the richest country, you know, in the world, in spite of being the tiny islands. They have the third largest economy after United States and China. Why? Because they have knowledge. So knowledge should not be something that is treated lightly. The building of knowledge. And as I have said, the most important way, the most structured way of building knowledge is the education system. Secondly, education is also critical in equalizing people in society, because God has endowed us with different gifts of learning and acquiring knowledge and using it. Therefore, you can find some people who are not high in society, but who have a potential, a high potential to gain and use knowledge. And you know, I am disappointed because Mr. Museveni, more than anybody else, should understand that. He was born in a very poor home. You know? If he had not had education, he would be living the most miserable life. Like maybe his peers whom he was with in the village, who did not gain that opportunity. So he's now possibly the richest man in Uganda, certainly with a lot of power, because he got education. And he got education not because his parents were rich. In other words, it's not just opening schools, there must be knowledge in those schools. There must be the building of knowledge in those schools. What Museveni has done now, under his government, even before we talk about COVID, is killing the building of knowledge in our education system. So there is education apartheid in Uganda. The poor people will go to government schools, there will be no knowledge there. UPE, USE, there is no knowledge there. The slightly richer people go to private schools where they get some knowledge. Not very much or so, but some knowledge. The very rich people go to international schools where there is the real building of knowledge. So you'll find that Mr. Museveni, who was liberated from poverty, from humiliating poverty, now his children and his grandchildren go to international schools, which are not available to the ordinary majority poor Ugandans, who will go to UPE, find no education, remain in poverty. So education is critical in those two respects: building the capacity of society to develop, but secondly, equalizing, giving opportunities, equal opportunities to people to develop themselves. Now, COVID is not in Uganda alone.
But before you go there, Doctor, when you talk about apartheid, it's as if you're saying that this is deliberate. It is being done deliberately.
It is.
To create an imbalance.
It is deliberate because it is choices we make. Look at how much money is put for the education of every child that is sent to UPE. It's almost nothing. In other words, we don't value.
The capitation grant.
We don't invest, yes. It's insignificant. The last time I had, I think it was something like $2 that
A term.
equivalent to $2. I think it was like 7,000 shillings. Equivalent to like $2. That is a choice. So when Mr. Museveni was going to school, education was being invested in. And by the way, this was by foreigners. The British. The British built schools that provided better education than the education provided by people who are supposed to be Ugandans. So this is, this is deliberate. There is no doubt about it.
Doctor, I think that it comes to what is happening today. Again, you think the continued closure of schools is a deliberate move?
Absolutely. Again, it is part of that. It's an extension of that apartheid.
To achieve what, Doctor?
Because to achieve greater domination of the majority of the people. So I've told you that the children who are in international schools, those schools have never closed.
Yep.
Those are continuing to build knowledge and real knowledge. The ones who are having some, scanty pieces of information acquired.
So you think it is a move to create the haves and have-nots in the same society?
It's an extension. It's not an attempt. That is the system. We live in an apartheid system. So now, COVID it should be understood, is not the reason schools are closed. And if it was the reason, then they will never open, because there is no vaccine for younger children. So now talk about the infection of parents.
Yeah, the justification.
So the justification
that we must protect the elderly
and
the vulnerable.
The elderly also does not arise. Why? Because the elderly are not seated at home protecting themselves or being protected by those who are keen to protect them. The elderly are moving in matatus, which are the sources of spreading the disease. They are in the Kikubo. They are everywhere. In fact, even when you are talking about keeping the schools closed, the children are home. The children themselves are not locked. They are playing football amongst themselves in the village. Wherever there is an open space, you go anywhere. You'll find children congregating there, playing, and going back indeed to kill their parents. So it's not just schools that will lead children to become infected and to infect their parents. So what should have been done, regardless of whether schools are open or not open, is to protect the elderly. I have not seen or heard any campaign anywhere to sensitize the elderly citizens of this country about the danger of interacting with young people. Because that's the most critical thing, that for the duration of the pandemic, until the elderly are vaccinated, They should avoid close contact with young people. If it is possible, they should even stay away from them. Now, that is real protection. But I have not had even any campaign. Secondly, if vaccines came like they did, we have had here 1 million, I think about 1.5 million vaccines which are here. They should have been prioritized to deal with those vulnerable people first.
Doctor, that has been done.
So the vulnerable, no, it wasn't.
I'm saying that is what now they are saying, that now
you see, it hasn't been
the vaccines are here.
It hasn't been done. If that was your concern, that should have been your priority. So by now, these 1.5 million vaccines should have vaccinated. And this is what countries did. They said the first people to be vaccinated are those above 80. And they would make sure all those above 80 are vaccinated. Then they go down. Those above 70 get vaccinated. Those above 60 get vaccinated. You are covering according to the level of vulnerability. Up to today, there is no such a system. Anybody just walks to the vaccination center.
But doctor,
they don't know.
But
even,
doctor,
they even don't know where those vulnerable people are.
Doctor, remember when in March, when this vaccination campaign was starting, the frontline workers and there were groups that were prioritized. The health workers, the security, the people with comorbidities.
That is all words, I can tell you. Did you see or hear anywhere the program where they were actually prioritizing them in vaccination? Nothing. So that you say, we have now finished vaccinating the healthcare workers. Nothing. Or that we have now finished vaccinating this age group. Nothing. Zero. So, and it's not just talking about, you should also know who they are and where they are. So a lot of work should have been done. This is why even now, the LOCs, local community leaders, should have within their local communities already had registers of people who are vulnerable. So the vaccination should be going straight, knowing where those people are and who they are. And they should be invited. Even the LOCs should be inviting people to say, you haven't been vaccinated, you haven't, there is no system. So this is not about COVID. This is not about protection, either of children or of their parents. Secondly, as I have told you, we are not an island. We live in East Africa, we live in Africa, and we live in the world, the interconnected world. In Tanzania here, children never even broke off.
Yeah, they didn't close the economy.
Yes.
The economy was not closed.
Have you heard that there is a disaster in Tanzania? Even others who broke off went back. There was a study done by the United Nations and a report published by the United Nations Education and the UNICEF.
But Doctor, on the issue of Tanzania, what the response has always been, the country refused to report on COVID-19, and they have a leader who even died, a head of state who died of COVID.
Well, first of all, I don't really know what their leader died of, and I don't support not having records of COVID in the country. I believe in science. And I think Tanzania was not helpful in that regard. But what I'm telling you is that also Tanzania is a neighbor of Uganda. The people in Isingiro have relatives in Tanzania and vice versa. And we have not heard, that there was mass death in Tanzania. It's not there. So, however managed or mismanaged the situation was, the point is that even where there is actually no measures taken, apparently, but they were taking, they were still advising people to use some soaps. So, but even there is no disaster. Education has continued. But it's not the only country. Look at Kenya, look at Rwanda, look at other places. Children are back to school.
So you think, Doctor, the COVID fight in Uganda,
as I have said,
the COVID fight in Uganda has been exaggerated and has been overemphasized?
It's not exaggerated. It's not just exaggeration. I have told you that even without COVID, there is a deliberate apartheid education, apartheid policy in Uganda. Now, of course, presided over by Mr. and Mrs. Museveni, and maybe that's why they took the education docket and kept it in their bedroom, So, this, as I have said, is simply an extension of that. So 2 years without education means money that should have been going to education is going into their own things, and this is a lot of money. So this is about, and if you lose 2 years of education for 15 million people, it means you have lost 30 million years of knowledge building.
2 years.
2 years times 15 million
learners.
It means 30 million years of building knowledge have in total been lost.
Can't it be compensated in future, like the president said?
It can't. Of course it
can't. That we even have adult learning.
Come on. The only thing that is not recoverable ever is time. Once it passes, it's not recoverable. You've lost it. So this is why I'm saying that losing 2 years of education is unconscionable and unnecessary. So what should have been done, even if vaccines were not discovered, forget about we are trying to vaccinate people. Even if vaccines were not discovered at all, it shouldn't mean that education should have remained closed indefinitely. That's nonsense. What should have happened, and this is a condition, by the way, where amongst the young people, up to 80% don't even get symptoms. We don't. And those who get symptoms, they are mild. So this is not about the young people. And the young people include their parents. Most parents are young people. Sure. I'm not talking about just the children. Anybody up to 50 years,
Yeah, above 50 years. From what we saw, there are about 3.3 million.
Yes, but up to 50 years, so their parents are not the problem. Most parents of children going to school are below 50. So it's not about children or their parents. Their grandparents, who are fewer, can be isolated to the extent that is possible. Can and should be isolated until they are vaccinated. In other words, they shouldn't mingle. Isolation, I mean, they shouldn't mingle with the young people without precautions. Not that the young people should not come to them, but there should be, quite good distancing. They should keep the hygiene. And, some of this is, of course, not practicable in
our African setting.
In our African setting.
I don't think it is practically possible.
But even where it is not, you see, there is there is simply no way you are going to avoid
separate a judge from a grandchild.
No judges can be separated from grandchild. By the way, even in the African setting, you don't find that the judges and the grandchildren in many places live in the same house. They normally have their place, because the father normally lives with their children, not their grandchildren. So, but I'm saying even where that is not possible, it shouldn't be the source, and government should make, if we had serious government, where that is the case, like where there's those situations, those elderly people could be, for the period of the pandemic, isolated centrally, because as I've said, there are not many. They could be kept have a building where they keep them and look after them for the period of the pandemic. But that should not stop. The school should not close, all these amenities for the country, all this wrong. So, but the schools, for the importance that I talked about, the critical importance, because even when you are talking about vaccines, where will vaccines come from unless you have knowledge? We cannot simply depend on getting ill and waiting for some
donor
people, even before donation, to make the vaccines. It's the most ridiculous thing. Now, to have knowledge to make vaccines, you must learn. So this is why, even if it meant some people dying, the benefit far outweighs
the risk
that you are trying to mitigate. And therefore, you see the practical thing. How many children, how many girls, children have become pregnant?
The numbers are soaring.
If you are protecting them from COVID, where are they getting the pregnancies from? Those pregnancies could not lead to getting COVID and bringing the COVID to the home.
But Doctor, the response that has been coming out on that particular matter is that even if a girl gets pregnant, it's better off than dying of COVID-19 or spreading COVID-19 and leading to other deaths.
But that is...
that's what's been coming out of government.
Well, trash comes endlessly comes out of government, because the idea is that if this child is having relationships outside that resulted into the pregnancy, she's not married. It means that she can contract COVID and bring it home. The same that you are trying to avoid. If this girl was at school and not becoming pregnant, maybe she will still bring COVID that she brings when she's also getting pregnant and losing out on education. So it doesn't make any logical, meaning. It is not underpinned by science, by practice. It is simply, to my mind, malice. Actually, I think Mr. Museveni is the most malicious leader that this country has had. As I have told you, he benefited from education provided by foreigners. That time even teachers were whites. They taught him and pulled him out of poverty. Now, a poor child could go to university like he did. Under his own watch, no poor family can have their children go to university.
Yeah, education is now expensive.
It's no longer possible. So how malicious can you be? That you are educated and pulled out of poverty, but you construct an education system that keeps people in poverty. It's the malice of the highest order.
Okay, Doctor, let's now look at the situation, how it stands. The reopening of schools is now pegged on, of course, vaccination, and the government is now looking at 4.8 million.
You see, Apollo.
A group of 4.8 million vulnerable group of people. And we have up to January, the beginning of January, probably, if we can manage it well, to have schools reopen. Do you see it happening? Do you see it working? That now the vaccines are here. We vaccinate 4.8 million people and then possibly safely open the schools in January.
You see, even before we talk about the vaccination, it should be understood by our country. All Ugandans must understand that reopening education will not just take an announcement. No. There must be very fundamental, plans and processes to reopen education. Because it's not like the beginning of a town. Many schools will not reopen, even when they announce that schools can open.
Especially private.
Many schools will not reopen. Many teachers will not come back to schools. Many parents have no capacity to take back their children back to school. So we are talking about a completely different situation that will not just take an announcement, schools can now open. No. There has to be a thorough investment, first of all, investment in understanding the current situation, to know what needs to be done, what resources are needed, and hefty amount of resources are needed to reopen education in Uganda, to make sure that the schools, or most schools that were in operation, can be operational, that teachers can come back to the education system, that the education system can function reasonably under the pandemic, under the new situation.
New normal.
The new normal. It takes a lot of investment, which is not being made, which is not, no attempt is even being made to understand what it will take. So,
for instance, what do you think should have been done around this time to prepare for safe reopening?
This is why, like I've said, the starting point would have been an assessment, a comprehensive assessment of what it will take to reopen schools, in terms of the situation of the schools, as they are and what they need to be in terms of the situation of the staffing for schools, in terms of the situation of the children and their parents who are coming to school. All these needed to be understood, and the plan for reopening schools made, a budget set aside, and then talk about reopening schools. None of that, as I have said.
Probably that will be done during these 2-3 months
Come on.
ahead.
The schools have been locked for coming to 2 years. We saw what happened when they attempted to reopen just ahead of the other lockdown. Nothing had been done in spite of the long period of lockdown, which is what excuse me, which is what we had warned about. The whole idea of having a pandemic without a plan. From March 2020, we should have had a plan that includes all these. Which plan is not there? So we have people just, not concerned, not showing concern at least, which is why, they said now children can go back to school in the same week. So, oh, sorry, they should go back. So, didn't that kill parents?
Yeah.
So, when we have a useless, dangerous regime like we have, it's a problem for everybody. And this is why it's important that the people of Uganda, this is not a matter to leave to Mr. Museveni and his wife. No. Or whoever else they are working with. This is a matter for the people of Uganda to really take on directly and effectively to save not just the children, but to save our country. And that's why we intend to start talking directly to the people of Uganda and inviting them to take matters up directly, not to sit each one in their home and think that things will be okay. No. All parents, all students, we all must come up and say, this is what we need to do. And if the regime or Mr. Museveni is not doing it or whatever, devise plan of what to do. And this is not a matter to leave to these people that have
Doctor,
destroyed the education in the
Doctor, you can appreciate the public, at least on this matter of continued closure of schools. The people have spoken, and the issue has been very, very contentious, probably, if you're suggesting something else.
Yes, people have spoken, and that's also what I am doing, just speaking. Speaking is not enough. We must move to the next step of taking steps to deal with the problem. And the steps must be taken by all of us. This is what I'm saying. It won't take just the regime to solve this. And I think, it's urgent, and as I have said, we intend to really focus a lot on this. Some of us who think our country deserves better, we intend to really take time to engage the people in Uganda to resolve this. We are going to leave it to just these people who have killed education.
All right, we are on Soul TV, and the program is The Dialogue. My name is Simapolo, and we have retired Colonel Dr. Kizza Besigye with us, and looking at issues that are happening in this country. Hopefully, we will wait to see how it will work. But Doctor, as we conclude on this particular matter, I asked, looking at the plan now of vaccinating at least 4.8 million people who fall into that vulnerable category, and now that the vaccines are available, do you see it happening in these few months, and hopefully schools reopening in January?
I have told you that again, if there was a plan which was undertaken from March last year, a lot would have been done to prepare for the vaccines once available to do what they need to achieve. There is no such a preparation. When you talk about the elderly, nobody knows where they are, really. Nobody knows who they are.
Okay.
So you just go to Kasanga Health Center and say, all the people come, and if they don't come, which is what has been happening, because they don't take it maybe as important. Some even haven't heard, they don't know. They are there in their homes, in their villages, they don't know. And nobody knows them. So how will you achieve it?
So you think we would have had a database of...
Of course, it's absolutely necessary. Of all the elements that you think are a priority, and a plan of how to systematically deal with them. You see, you know, I have had my 2 jabs, not from here, because my family lives outside. An invitation is sent. You have been given an appointment to come for your first jab on this day at this time, and they follow up. If you have it, then they give you an appointment for the second one. It's systematic, because first of all they can tell how old you are. Now here we don't of course have that elaborate system, but for this particular pandemic, where you have identified the priorities, or where you should identify priorities, you should have a database of them, should create a database. And it's not very difficult, because they actually have a lot of people being paid, doing nothing. In all these villages, there is a village intelligence officer, VISO. There is, I don't know, PISO. There is all kinds of useless people roaming in all these villages. So if they wanted to have to apply them,
the latest I heard is that the Ministry of Education has announced that all teachers actually, especially in private schools, should register as soon as possible. I think it is in that direction.
So you are asking whether they will have
vaccinated 4.8 million.
4.8 million people. Those are the...
By January.
Those are the ones...
The elderly.
Who are elderly.
Teachers. School-going learners above 18.
I think that number is... I think the 4.8 are just the elderly, maybe. The learners above 18 are very many. They are very many.
Yeah, there are many.
But I don't know whether... I think they didn't peg, even from their confused plan, I don't think they pegged it to vaccinating all those above 18. But just the most vulnerable, even if they were 4.8 million. There is no plan that will do that in the next 3 months. It won't happen. You saw how long it took to distribute masks, which don't need fridge, which don't need anything, you know, or just to distribute posho in Kampala here.
During the first lockdown.
Without going. So this, which requires, you know, processes, cold chains, and all this, they simply don't have the capacity. The ones this 1 million vaccines they had, they are expiring. They're expiring. They have been here. They are expiring without using them. So why would vaccines expire when you have the vulnerable?
Okay.
You know, you see, we are dealing with a hopelessly incompetent, you know, corrupt system. It simply cannot achieve a task like this, even if they are given 2 years.
Okay, Doctor, I think let's cross over to another topic. The issue about insecurity in the country. Somehow now the insecurity that was reported in Greater Masaka and some other areas has subsided, and they have enjoyed some relative peace. From your own perspective, Doctor, do you think, of course, after security, coming in strongly, people, some have been arrested. We hear some actually court processes are going on. Do you think this has been handled in a better way? Do you think it's all over now? We can probably wait for another issue, but for now it is done.
Well, before I comment on that, I must say how, you know, abhorrent, how terrible it is to see, you know, gross abuse of rights, you know, trampling over the rule of law in our country that is going on today. You know, sometimes citizens who are there, you know, doing their own chores and not yet aggressed by anything, can easily relax, and when they hear people in trouble, they think it is very far away. People never try to put themselves in the shoes of those who are having, you know, the kind of challenges that we are talking about. So last evening, you know, I saw the Honorable Alan Sewanyana, who is one of those that had been taken to court in relationship with the crimes in Masaka. He was charged with murder and remanded. His lawyers applied for bail, which is a right of every suspect, because when you are accused, you are just a suspect. More so when you are accused by people that have no credibility of any kind, you know, people who are known to accuse people maliciously, you know, because that's what this government is. They accused me of rape. And the judge, fortunately, at that time, there were still quite a number of judges in the system that were, you know, principled. The judge rebuked them in his judgment that, you know, this should never have happened. It was something repugnant, you know, but they did it, you know. I was at that time also charged with treason, with terrorism. I was charged both in the civilian courts and in the military courts at the same time for the same reasons. I was charged together with 22 other people, you know, including my own younger brother. They were given a bail, these people. And outside the High Court of Uganda, in front of the judges, armed men grabbed these bailed people. Some were beaten, I mean all of them were badly beaten. Some were taken to Arua, some were taken to Bushenyi, and all of them charged with murder. Now, afresh. Murder of people that have never lived. You know? Just put some name. He murdered. The ones in Arua said they had murdered somebody called the Mawa. No village, nowhere he lived. And the others, I think the ones in Bushenyi, they said they had murdered somebody called the Aruanga, who is not from any village, who has never lived. So we are talking about accusations made by a regime of that type. You saw the other time when they charged Bob Wine, said he had machine guns
in Arua,
in his room in Arua. They even brought machine guns. They said these are the machine guns he had. You can imagine. So, if you are charged by such a regime, which has no credibility at all, you know, everybody must be treated, even in the best of circumstances where regimes are credible. Suspects are suspects. They are presumed innocent
until proven
until you have proved it. And as we know, these ones don't even never intend to prove anything. They just use charges to terrorize people. So Sewanyana applied for bail. The court granted him bail. They put conditions of bail, to pay 20 million, to deposit a passport, to do I don't know what sureties, to bring sureties which the court was satisfied with. The sureties were also bonded. Eventually, when everything was satisfied, Sewanyana walks out of the prison in Kivu last evening. And I think he didn't even make 5 steps. That notorious van called the drone speeds next to him. These armed people in black, clad in black, you know, just like the image we have of you know, terrible people, you know. He grabbed him, put him in a van, and sped off. Now, when you are talking about crime, and you, the state, you are doing crime to because that is criminal, really. This is a member of parliament. You know, he's representing his people. He has got bail officially. If you even had other charges, supposing you had other charges, he has been in prison for 2 weeks. Why wouldn't you bring those charges? Because these applications for bail were being done with their knowledge, they were in courts. So if you don't want him to be released, why not prefer new charges and they are known? Why must you act in that way in the night? This is criminal. So you cannot talk about dealing with crime when you are a criminal. This is where it starts. We have a criminal regime. That's where it starts.
Doctor, a case of Honorable Aaron Sewanyana is not the first case of rearresting people who have been freed by court.
This is what I'm telling you, which is why I'm calling it a criminal regime.
But the justification they give, the authorities say that these people have other charges, have other cases.
I have told you that,
and they are not.
I have told you that it is all right if you want to prefer charges. Injustice is the economic injustice, social injustice, you know, which we are talking about, education, you know. Somebody has no way of taking children back to school, has no this, you know, can't get health care, his wife is expecting, there is no known way of how that wife will get a child safely or whatever. This man is running around and can commit crime. So injustice, whether it is social, whether it is economic, whether it is political, where people have no voice, you know. And in the case of Masaka, I would like to think that political injustice is the first suspect. Because we have seen a trend, a pattern of, you know, wide-scale crime like happened in Masaka.
Elsewhere?
Yes, including Masaka itself. It's not the first time. You know, there was the Chidawarime side the other time. We have seen that in Kasese. And you'll find that they are post-election. Here in Kampala, there was a time after the election when they were throwing bombs in the car park, in the bars, grenades, you know, after elections. And they arrested many people that they are throwing the grenades. Nobody was ever convicted. When they, I think so the intention usually is after election, because there has been a lot of injustice in the election, because they have actually grabbed the power. They want to create a situation where everybody fears.
Soul Television, Femunyo.
Guletede MTN Kabode. Esimu ya smart josobola okwefunira olwo n'ogisasula mpola. Nkugambye yenebye ya kabi ate nga tamanyi endala zonna mu katale ejjirako omuggo gwa internet. Kati ky'oba okola gwenyiga sitiimu 65*5*2# okebere oba osobola okwefunira MTN Kabode. Olumala okebera bw'oti dduka buddusi ku dduuka lya MTN lyonna eri kuli okumpi weefunire MTN Kabode. Olwo olyoka ogisasule mpola ng'osasula nusu 15 zokka buli wiiki okumala emyezi 6 ng'okozesa MTN Momo. Weefunire Kabode kati dish.
Everywhere you go, MTN.
Thinking
of safe, convenient shopping experience? Think StarTimes Go. Enjoy 10% discount on stay home essential delivered to you safely in the shortest time possible. Make your favorite juice with high-tech blenders. Maintain your grooming standards with first-class shavers and hair clippers. Headphones and speakers for your personal entertainment. Variety of home and personal use products at a very friendly price. That's not all. StarTimes Pay TV customers simply renew your monthly subscription and you will automatically enjoy up to 30% discount on each StarTimes Go product. Tune to StarTimes Go shopping channel 203 on antenna or 002 dish for product details. For orders and safe door-to-door delivery services, please call 0317 117 777. StarTimes Go, with you no matter the situation.
John loves football on GoTV, so he traded being a best man for being a best fan. Miriam stood her date up just for this matchup. Albert and his family had plans, but they couldn't miss this, and neither can you. Because this new football season, this is football worth watching. Get a GoTV decoder and 1 month of GoTV Max for only 89,000 shillings to get all the football action. GoTV. Live it, love it.
Soul Television, Femunyo.
And fear-mongering has been seen as one of the tools of the NRM regime in keeping power. Fear-mongering. You may recall even in 1996, the first election, Mr. Museveni faced. He published on the front pages of newspapers scarves of the people who died in Ruwero, saying, you know, if you don't vote wisely, this is what is going to come back. So this is
so Doctor, as authorities say, the people, the criminals behind all this terror, are moving to instill fear in society.
As I have said, I don't know myself
it's the other way around. That's what you impute, that it's the other way around. It is government or the state, again, trying to create fear in the public.
It is the one to benefit from it. Because you see, when you are dealing with crime, you look for the motive. The motive of the state in this case, of creating fear so that people don't rise up to challenge them for the stolen election, is what we see post every election. After every election, there are two campaigns. One is a campaign to instill fear. The other is a campaign to draw people to the next election. You'll find those two trends after every election. One is causing insecurity and fear. The other one is starting to discuss the next election. So you'll find Mohozi 2026. I don't know who. I've even seen another relative from the first family is also coming 2026. Whom are they going to be facing? They start creating people to divert people's minds to the next election. These are constant trends. This is why I think that the first suspect in the massacre things is the state itself. We have seen it in northern Uganda, where they are challenged, where they are opposed. We've seen it in Kasese, where they are opposed. Now, what has happened here in Buganda, where they were wiped out, we are seeing it again. And indeed, I saw the Minister Otafiri saying that, you know, when NRM was in charge of massacre, there was no problem. So there is a problem because now you people, you have taken it over.
So finally, Doctor, on this particular matter, looking at how at the history of this kind of insecurity, like you've enumerated, do you think now it's over? Do you think they have achieved, if at all there is such a motive? Do you think now it's over?
Well, I don't know. I don't know how they calibrate their actions, if they are the ones. As I have said, I have no certainty as to who is doing this. But what I know is that as long as the injustice persists, conflict and violence will persist.
Will persist.
And because the regime becomes more and more unpopular as it stays longer and longer, so does the repressive measures intensify as they stay longer and longer. So I have no doubt myself that we shall continue to see violence in different forms. We shall continue to see heightened repression, but people will also resist more because, as I have said, it's time for people to really resist.
Okay, well, viewers, the program is The Dialogue. My name is Tsimapolo. We have the retired Colonel, Dr. Besigye, and we still have some time to ask him questions about what is happening in the country. We need to know what actually is happening in the Forum for Democratic Change, FDC, the party founded, and we also need to ask him about what he thinks will be its future after having, of course, handed over the leadership to other players. We go for a break now. When we return, it is The Dialogue. We'll be right back.
Soul Television, Femunyo.
Entambula z'ennyonyi zisaziddwamu ku bizinga eby'e Canale nga bino biri wansi w'eggwanga erya Spain naddala ekya La Palma, olusozi gye luwandula omuliro. Mu nnaku eziyise lwongedde okulaga obusungu, abantu ne bakubirizibwa basenguke. Eggwanga erya Myanmar litegeezezza nti terigenda kubako kye lyogera mu lutuula olw'ekibiina ky'amawanga amagatte olukomekkerezebwa ku Mande. Gavumenti e Myanmar yawambibwa bannamagye mu February ne bajjako omukulembeze Aung San Suu Kyi eyalondebwa abantu. Mahamat Idris Deby, mutabani w'omugenzi Idris Deby eyali pulezidenti wa Chad, alonze ababaka ab'ekiseera 93 okutuula mu paliamenti nga ye neebaga amateeka aganateekateeka okulonda. Ezimu ku nteekateeka ze baasookerako mu May kwe kulonda Ssaabaminisita ayawukana ku bannamagye. Oluvannyuma lw'okugugulanira ebbanga, Amerika, China ne Canada bakkiriziganyiza ne bawanyisiganya abasibe. Meng Wanzhou akulira ebyenfuna mu kampuni eya Huawei ateereddwa ne China neeyimbula bannansi ba Canada babiri. Amerika ekkiriza ebimu ku bibiina by'obuyambi okugabirira gavumenti ey'Abatalibaani mu ggwanga erya Afghanistan wadde yabassaako ekkoligo mu byenfuna, naye abakkiriziddwa bateereddwako obukwakkulizo beemalire ennyo mu by'obulamu n'obugabirizi bw'emmere.
Soul Television, Femunyo.
Welcome from the break. The program is The Dialogue. My name is Simapolo, and we have the former president for the Forum for Democratic Change FDC, retired Colonel Dr. Kizza Besigye, and we are talking politics. Doctor, before we went for a break, we asked and we want to know how you now look at the prospects of the Forum for Democratic Change FDC. You handed over power, and people think that probably when you handed over power, there was a slowdown in work within the party.
There was what?
A slowdown in progress of the party.
Well, I don't know what indicators those who say so would be using. And I left the leadership of FDC in 2012, so it's been 9 years since I left the leadership of FDC. I'm always intrigued when I'm introduced as former
president
of FDC, because it's like since 9 years ago I have done nothing except having been.
Now you are the president of the People's Government.
Yes, I have another government I am presiding over. Certainly I'm farming, I am doing business, I am an activist, a very active political actor. So I left FDC 9 years ago, and part of the reason I chose to step down, because I stepped down 3 years to the end of my term. Part of the reason I chose to step down was because I came to the conclusion that party political work in itself would not lead to the kind of change that we were seeking. Because I had contested in election 3 times at that stage. I was persuaded that we lived under military rule and not even what some people call, a hybrid
democracy.
Hybrid government. Hybrid meaning both dictatorship and some elements of democracy. My very, very clear sense is that this is an outright military rule with a very thin veneer, a very thin cover, to make it appear as if it's a civilian government. And having come to that conclusion, it was clear to me that political parties, which are democratic institutions, cannot survive and thrive and do what they are intended to do in a military regime. And you see, that's why, I respect to that extent General Idi Amin. Because you see, General Idi Amin, for him what he did, he said, I am a general, and I am going to run a military government.
Rule by decree.
Yes. And he abolished parliament and these local councils, and he appointed military people to run the state. You see, that was decent. That was decent. It was honest. You know? Even when he came to the conclusion that he wanted to rule for life, he declared himself life president. So now the problem is we have hypocrites, dishonest people who say, you know, we are going to have elections. Yet they know that they are running a military government, that really they don't believe in the parliament.
That's one of the reasons you decided to quit party leadership.
Yes, so I realized how all institutions of state were captive, and how even the non-state institutions were in the process of capture. A process that you see even now intensifying, you know, capturing civil society organizations, NGOs, and taking them over with security, with whatever. So it was very clear to me that traditional political party work and contest in elections will not lead to change of government or system. And that's why I stepped down. So my view of the prospect of political parties, not just FDC, but all political parties, is that their prospect for survival and growth and thriving is very dim because of the environment in which they happen to function. And therefore, I think it's unfair to assess FDC when I was there and FDC when I was not there, because like we have seen in terms of security, the longer the regime lasts, the more unpopular it becomes, the more their repression, grotesque violation of human rights, you know, the trampling of the rule of law, the more they become. So, whereas, as I told you, in the early 2000s, I could run to court and maybe find a judge who was not appointed by Museveni. Today, 100% of all judges of all courts were appointed by Museveni, and appointed with clearly evil intention of subverting justice, because he knows that those who challenge his injustice will run to those courts. So the parties are under greater attack than at the time I was a leader
of FDC.
And that's why, you know, it's unfair to compare FDC when I was leading it and FDC now. But having said that, I think FDC has done a tremendous job in those very, very challenging circumstances to hold their ground. Because they have maintained their pursuit of change unflinchingly. Some others, have changed the tactics and even joined Museveni. If you see like UPC of Kenya, it's now part of NRM, and you may find others whose messages are now a bit, confused or confusing. But FDC, I must say that I remain proud of its standing tall in terms of holding the light of the struggle for democratic change, as the name is. FDC arose out of a time of struggle for democracy when there were no parties. The first struggle was even for the parties to become legally allowed to function. So I'm proud that FDC has maintained that. But it has maintained its national outlook that we, like if you see the members of parliament of FDC, there will be members from the east, members from the north, members from central, members from the west. That is critical in terms of having a political party. You need to have a national presence everywhere. And so, really
But Doctor, that also has changed. That also has changed. Though you no longer believe in parties delivering political strategies and objectives, but when you left FDC, some people actually think that if you went back wholly, you'll give new blood to FDC and probably to, because from the results of the recently concluded elections, FDC has lost ground even in areas where it initially had more strength.
Like which one?
Like Kasese.
No. You see, you have to be careful. And I really see lack of analysis, proper analysis. Even amongst people who should know better, academia, researchers, political analysts, who equate political strength in our situation with the number of MPs
in Parliament.
In Parliament, that's wrong. First of all, as I have told you, like in Kasese, after 2006, when we won massively, what followed was a massacre of untold proportions. Hundreds of people were arrested and charged with murder. Hundreds.
You're talking about the 2016 incident?
Yes. Post-election violence is what I'm talking about. Hundreds were arrested. All this moved on up to 2021. In fact, during the elections, if you recall.
Yeah, in December.
Yes. Some of the prisoners
were released
and put in buses and taken to go and now say, they were saying, if you vote NRM, even others will come. We shall free them. You know, those are the kinds of things the king of the Rwenzurus, the
Mumbere,
is still incarcerated here. You know? So all these...
No, sorry, he's Omusinga, not the Mumbere.
Yes.
The Omusinga.
Yes. All these must be factored into what you saw in 2026. Of course, in the intervening period, if you follow whatever is going on after the massacre, General Saleh, with his tons of money for wealth creation, went and camped in Kasese.
Yeah.
Try and compromise leaders. It's not sort of problems.
They said he was on Operation Wealth Creation.
Yes, and he will find he will go wherever they have, now he's in northern Uganda, and so on. But in spite of that, you know, in spite of that, we won massively. The woman MP, and don't forget, the woman MP is elected by everybody
in the district,
in the whole district. So what does that mean? If we are winning the district, woman MP, you know, and we also won 2 other constituencies in Kasese, Bwera and Bukonzo.
So, Doctor, you're saying, leave alone the results of the election, FDC is still strong on the ground.
So I was telling you that, so in such situation, there is sometimes misanalysis and say, because now the numbers of MPs have gone down, the support of FDC in Kasese. Actually, I would like to believe that the support of FDC in Kasese has even intensified.
Really?
Absolutely. And I speak, you know, with good knowledge of the ground. But secondly, why there is misanalysis is to forget that in an election of first past the post, election where they declare whoever gets the highest number of votes as the winner, in such an election, you could find that even the most popular party nationally does not have a single MP.
Okay.
It can happen. Because all that is needed is to look for your strongholds and plant many candidates, divide the vote, and suppress the numbers of people who will win, because it's just the person. So you can find that NRM may win with 30% of the vote, or even with 20% of the vote.
It is possible.
Because they have sponsored and divided the vote.
The list of candidates are many.
Yes,
on the ballot.
They can create candidates. They have money. They can create candidates, independent candidates, FDC independent candidates. They can create them, and they chop up the 70% of our vote. The 30% comes to parliament. So in an election, it's only where you have proportional representation that you can tell the size of support of a political party.
Okay.
So I really believe that FDC, even now, nationally, is very, very strong.
Then, Doctor, they will assess you on the front you opted to take, the front of activism, because you said you looked at political parties as not going to take you to the intended objectives. Let's talk about the activism front. How far have you gone, and how would you...
You see, the activism front...
How do you evaluate your efforts?
The activism front is based on 3 legs. 3 important legs. The first one is the understanding and active participation of the population. So the population must understand and actively participate in activism. That's the first, which we built and had reached, I think, a critical level, the understanding and activism. We had built from 2011 to 2016 and beyond. We had built that activism. Secondly is the organization. So first is the activism, the individual citizens' activity. Secondly is how to link up the citizens who are active so that they act together and speak together with one voice. Now, the organizational capacity is critical. And thirdly, it is to harmonize all those organizations that seek change so that they act together. Because, you know, I told you that there is a misunderstanding of people thinking that maybe there is a democracy. And so you find organizations come up and compete for offices. So you have DP, you have UPC, you have FDC. Recently we go to NUP and JEMA and CP and others. All these come up to contest as organizations against each other. They are rivals for the activism that I am pursuing to succeed. These must not look at each other as rivals, but as partners in activism for change.
How far have you moved to achieve that?
Yes, and if the moment we achieve it, change will be there. So in the last election, and we had, as I have said, we had nearly got there in 2016. We had nearly got there. But we didn't, and between 2016 and 2021, a lot of things changed. Amongst which came also a suggestion that no, actually elections can still cause change. If we change Besigye, because it seems Besigye was the problem. Some even suggested Besigye, it seems, was working with Museveni. They knew each other. So if we get somebody else, elections will cause change. I think you remember that there was that campaign. Besigye and Museveni, these are the same. So let's get somebody, we shall get change.
Did it ever go?
The what?
That mindset, that perception.
Did it ever?
Did it ever win? And has it?
Well, first of all, and you know, when I saw that this was creating confusion, I said, okay. I stepped aside. And of course, we had an election, and you should ask them what happened. So now, I think there is, I'm beginning to see now a coming together of minds that no, it was not Besigye.
Besigye was not a problem.
Was not a problem. I think I'm beginning to see that now. Because that campaign had come up, and so I said, okay, you know, you go and see. They now know that no, what we were saying was correct. And so I think there is again a good opportunity now to come together and cause the change.
But doctor, you are talking about the leadership of NUP. Actually, the people who are in NUP have been here for all this time. Those are the people who you are choosing of looking at you as a problem. They have been here for all that time. And now that you say that now they are realizing that you were not the problem, does that mean that now we will not have have a situation when another group will come up in future with the same perception?
Understand the people I'm saying now is not so much the leaders, but the people they talk to. The people who will cause change.
But it starts with the leaders.
It may start with the leaders, but the people who will cause change are the ordinary people. And when I was talking about the understanding and active engagement, it is of ordinary people.
Oh, okay.
So if ordinary people understand that no, they were correct, elections are not going to save us. It doesn't matter what the leaders say. People then know. Say, we tested this, we then got, you know.
It didn't work out. It didn't work out.
Yes, so what I'm saying is now, you can't tell them that it was Besigye who was the problem. So now they know that even if it is somebody else, there is another problem. And that is very important. So I think there is a good opportunity again for everybody to unite, to say, let's have change now. And we don't have, you know, the beauty of this is that to have change in Uganda, you don't have to wait for an election. If that realization was firmly made and people determined that we need to have a new situation, we will have a new situation even before the end of this year. It's possible. Anytime people determine that and unite to say we don't want this, it will stop. There and then it will stop. And I am increasingly, I'm hopeful, I'm increasingly seeing, you know, that understanding first, that, you know, elections won't do it. Secondly, there is also growing desperation, you know, because, you know, as I told you, you know, the colonial government, the reason they came here was to take our resources. Yeah. In other words, the colonialists were parasites. They came to eat on us. But what is now very clear is that these ones are worse parasites than the colonialists, you know, because these are inside us. You see, parasites have two types. There are parasites which are called
internal and external.
Yes. You know, like a flea. A flea feeds on your blood. Or like a bed bug. Or like lice. All these are parasites. But they are less dangerous than malaria parasite. The malaria parasite, which goes in your blood, goes into the head, goes into everywhere, it kills you. These are internal parasites. And the pain they have caused over all these years has now left everybody desperate. And so we have a desperate...
You're referring to greed and corruption in MDS and in government?
Yes, I mean, I don't know whether it's corruption. It's just plunder. It's not corruption. Maybe it's of the policemen who take 5,000 from a taxi driver. These ones take our entire livelihoods, you know, which I was telling you. They steal in trillions. Even in COVID, you saw, they borrowed money under COVID and took trillions. First took a trillion, 1,000 billion to State House, which disappeared there. They took more than 4 trillion to defense. That all this is for separate work of COVID. All that money, even the Auditor General is looking for it. It's not anywhere. So, as a result, we have a desperate population. This is why I was telling you that it won't even be enough to say let schools open. We must think about how children will meet the costs of coming to school. How parents will meet the costs. You know, teachers. So the number of desperate people in the country, combined with now the realization that even if we wait to 2026, there will be no change. I think these two should now come together to get the people of Uganda to say, yes, I think whatever it takes should be done to change the direction of our country. So,
Doctor, as we wind up, for the unity you aspire for, in your struggle, you're looking at masses. You're no longer looking at leaders.
Leaders are important, but not entirely determinant. What is determinant is the population. The leaders, if you are talking about the ones,
the leaders of opposition,
who have been offering themselves,
opposition groups.
You see, the population is always with the leaders. They are leaders of the societies, of people where they live. They are there, community leaders are there. And they can take up the mantle of leading the people in getting a new direction for the country. So, quite often, the leaders who are the elites of our society, those usually become compromised. And it's not just here. You find they are compromised. All leaders, not just politicians. The church leaders will become compromised. The civil society leaders become compromised. But ordinary people, in their setting, You know, they have leaders, and so all they need is the understanding. All they need is the organizational competencies, and the organizational competencies are now much easier with the ease of communication.
Yeah.
Because people can now use the modern technology to communicate and to coordinate many people. So I'm not worried myself about the lack of leaders. It would help a lot if the elites in our society, the advantaged people who are more knowledgeable, who are more exposed, who have more resources, if they joined the population. Eventually they do, when they realize that the situation is no longer tenable. They opportunistically join. So eventually they will join, but it would be helpful if they join early.
Okay, Doctor, finally, what are you up to? And you talked of Plan B when you were leaving FDC. What should we expect? Plan C or anything else? Or you're still stuck to Plan B?
Well, what we really call Plan B is the population-led change that the country needs now. And by the way, you see that change led by the population is very important, because it is the change that guarantees a democratic system. A democratic system is not guaranteed by leaders. It is guaranteed by people. To put demands on leaders and to cause leaders to account to them. And if they don't perform, to be able to remove them and put others. That it takes informed, active citizens to do that. So if we don't achieve that, even if we get a change of leader, Museveni could go, he may even collapse in his sleep, and somebody will wake up and say, I'm now the new leader. The situation will not change. It may even become worse. So what is the fundamental change? And not a change of guards, which is what Mr. Museveni was totally mistaken about in 1986, when he said what you are seeing is a fundamental change. A fundamental change only happens, political fundamental change only happens when the ordinary unarmed people take over power and subordinate the armed, put the armed under the unarmed. That will be the fundamental change. Not the armed taking over from other armed. That's the classical change of guards.
The coups, aren't?
Yes, whatever it's a coup, whether it's a call it a revolution, but with guns, as long as guns are taking over from other guns, it's a change of the guard.
Okay.
What is a fundamental change is when ordinary people organize themselves sufficiently to defeat the armed rulers and subordinate the military.
I hope, Doctor, you must be conscious of incidents like what happened in Libya and what happened in Sudan,
Yes.
where what you're talking about exactly happened, and they still have issues with the leadership.
You have to be careful. Certainly, what happened in Libya was, and what is still going on, is a war. People must remain active to ensure that their will is respected. And it takes time to cause what they call consolidation of democracy, to become the culture of the people, to become inherent in them. It takes time. It's not just a switch because the military has been now defeated, civilians have come in. They must now entrench systems that consolidate what they have done. So it's a process, but it's an unavoidable process. If you are to get to a situation where you have stable democracy, sustainable democracy, there are no two ways about it. We have to go through that. Yes, it has pain. It's painful. But we must go through painful process to get to the good place we want to be in. And, you know, the earlier we move, the better for us. The danger of not acting in a timely way is that the ordinary people can become more and more weakened. They can become more and more fractured, divided. And so when the armed now collapse as they do, you can have a collapse of the country, like you saw in Somalia. You can have a failed state. And I think Ugandans should rise up to the occasion to really redirect the country onto a path that leads us to a just and good government, and where we have equal opportunities, which will engender peace, sustainable peace and development. And I think it's time.
The time is now.
The time is now.
Okay, Doctor, we must thank you for your time, and in just a few words, speak to the people. I remember at one time you got, I mean, you even said that Ugandans maybe are not so fast to pick on such issues.
No, you are right. I have been, you know, quite frustrated by, you know, the way our people have been responding to very, very serious situations. Because even what we were discussing here, the education question, is a matter that I would have expected the Ugandans to become more serious about. The health. You know, one of the most depressing things is the health of our children. We live in a country where 1 in every 3 children are stunted, and stunted for life. Now, this calls on us to really take matters very seriously and very urgently. So I really invite you, all of you, our viewers and listeners, wherever you are, to think very seriously, very deeply about what is going on. This is not a partisan matter that, you know, we are talking about this party and that party, NRM and no. This is a survival matter. Survival of all of us. You saw what happened when people were in hospitals without oxygen. It did not matter whether you were yellow, whether you were red or blue or what, your color. There was simply no oxygen in the hospitals. We have no doctors in our healthcare system. You know, we have no medicine. So we need to urgently get together and move our country in a different direction. Thank you very much, and may the good Lord bless all of you.
Well, thank you so much, retired Colonel Dr. Kizza Besigye, the former president of the Forum for Democratic Change FTC, and now the president of the People's Government. We thank you for your time, and we thank you, our viewers, for your time. The program Dialogue will be back next Saturday. My name is Timapolo, and I must wish you a splendid weekend, and God bless you.
Soul Television, Femunyo.